I'd like for you to transport yourself back to 1980 and picture the most outrageous, over-the-top poster car. It'd be expensive and low and wide. It'd have an engine in the middle, a manual transmission, and rear-wheel drive. It would be a limited production Gandini box-flared red economy car. Here in America, we don't even think about French cars, and it's for good reason. We haven't had French cars here at all in an entire generation of people. So I'm gonna have to talk about this hot hatch in hot hatch terms that we all understand, even those of us here in America. So let's talk about this car in terms of the Volkswagen Golf and its performance variants, the GTI and the Golf R.
Once upon a time, Renault made a front-drive subcompact, a size smaller than the Golf, and it called it the 5. In America, it was sold somewhat embarrassingly as the Renault R, and it was le slow, hitting 60 miles an hour in 16.7 seconds. In 1976, for the European market, Renault slapped in a hot motor to create the Renault 5 Alpine. Think of it as a GTI version, remembering that the GTI hadn't been invented yet. Fast forward 31 years to 2007, and the Volkswagen GTI is still very much a thing. VW wanted to show just how cool its engineers were, so it did the most outrageous thing possible. It took Germany's best-selling car, the Golf, and put its most powerful engine in it, the twin-turbo W12 from the Bentley Continental, making 650 horsepower. But instead of leaving the engine up front, it shoved it up the back and made it drive the rear wheels. VW presented its Frankenstein creation to the world, fully expecting us all to lose our minds.
Kinda everyone did, except for the French. They're all eye roll. But for once, their cynicism was valid because Renault did exactly that same thing all the way back in the 1970s. But instead of building one cynical car for marketing purposes, they put it into production and sold almost 5,000 of them to the public. It was exactly the same recipe. They took France's most popular car and shoved France's most powerful engine right up its butt, taking a practical front-wheel drive car and ruining any semblance of practicality for the sole purpose of kicking the snot out of supercars. Now, how pathetic does that make cars like today's Golf R look? Here's a hint. Very.
Like so many of history's most special cars, the Turbo was a homologation car sold to the public strictly so that the company could take it racing. In other words, it probably cost Renault billions to develop the thing, during which not one single accountant was allowed in the room. Au contraire, it had an interior that looked like a French Art Deco museum exhibit, with the most outrageously cool seats, dash, and that steering wheel, all of which were shared with absolutely no other car.
It had an aluminum roof, doors, and hatch, and then fiberglass polyester hood, bumpers, and fenders. And credit for these outrageous fender flares goes to none other than Bertone's madman genius, Marcello Gandini, the same guy who did the Mura, Countach, and Stratos.
Keep in mind, Renault only built this car because it had to. It had to build 400 to take it racing. But demand was so great that those were all sold out before the car went into production. Some 1,800 of them were produced in 3 years. But that bespoke interior and the aluminum bits meant they cost a fortune to build. Somebody finally called in les accountants to stop the bleeding, and they swapped in an off-the-shelf interior from the regular front-drive 5, and they ditched the aluminium. The result is the Turbo 2, this, le car, and Renault sold another boatload of them, including 200 Evo models, of which this particular car is one.
Can we just get back to the obvious here for a second? There is an engine in the back of this economy car where the back seats used to be, and that is amazing. It's also not actually all that difficult to do. I hear people say all the time, well, it's so easy, you just turn the engine around. Well, if you turn the engine around, the car would go backwards, and even the French aren't that weird. No, it's even simpler than that. You can just take the whole powertrain wholesale, engine, transmission, suspension even, lift it up, put it in the back of the car, and voila. That's exactly how Renault built this car.
Many mid-engine cars have been built this way, and today's Lotus Evora, for example, basically has a Camry powertrain shoved up its derriere.
Something very different here is that Renault didn't use the typical transverse engine layout where the engine is sideways across the hood. No. They used a longitudinal engine where the engine goes front to back, much like Audi does today, where the engine is completely cantilevered in front of the front wheels. Think about what happens when the engine's at the back. It's still in front of the wheels, but that means it's in front of the rear wheels. This is the supercar layout. This is the Lamborghini Aventador and the Bugatti Veyron and every Ferrari. And speaking of Ferraris, this thing is Ferrari fast. Then, like now, Ferraris are among the fastest cars on the road, and this was faster. Imagine Magnum PI in his 308 in the middle of some violent car chase, and he gets passed by some nitwit in his tall, French dorky hatchback. That's the kind of television I would watch.
The Turbo's engine was a teensy little 1.4 liter without even an overhead camshaft. It had push rods, for the love of God, but add 12 pounds of boost and you can make anything fast, especially if you cool the intake charge. Yes, the Turbo had one of the first intercoolers ever in a production car, and the result was 160 horsepower.
It is 14 inches long. It's the size of a jet ski motor. It's so cute. Boop.
But that brutal power is only part of the story. The R5 rode on the type of suspension used when chassis engineers mean it, like when they're making a rally car. Double wishbones at all four corners, along with four-wheel disc brakes. So when the road turned twisty, the R5 Turbo left Ferraris for dead.
On the skid pad, this car generated an outrageous 0.86 G, humiliating a Ferrari 308 GTB by about the same measure as a Ferrari 308 GTB would humiliate a family sedan. And I gotta say, this is a lot better to drive than a 308 GTB. It has a lot of lag. But once it's finally under boost, it's genuinely quick. The engine sounds and responds a whole lot like an STI motor. And the weird thing is there's no mechanical noise in this, even though the engine is right here. I mean, there's no mechanical noise coming through this at all. All you hear is exhaust sound and all of these amazing turbo noises, which just makes it even more fun to drive around the lag. This thing is a riot to drive, but I just can't get past one other thing. Can you imagine if today's Golf R out-accelerated and then out-handled a Ferrari F8, and then was better balanced and more fun to drive too? I mean, this is absolutely insane stuff.
But it needs to be said this Renault cost a fortune, half of what the 308 did. So if today's Golf R were priced the same way, it would cost $125,000. Which would be an especially large sum of money if it looked like a supercar. But the Renault 5 was practical. It was the world's first car to feature a hatch cut all the way down to the bumper for easy loading. Except, of course, that in the Turbo, Renault preloaded that cargo hold with an engine.
And whatever space is left tends to get very hot. C'est magnifique. But this whole thing is just so stupid. And that's what I love about homologation cars. These are the type of cars that would have never, ever been built ever, except car companies have to.
For racing. And anything needed on the race cars goes on the street cars. And that's when stuff gets really weird.
Here's a good one. The engine may only be 1.4 liters, but the fuel tank is 93 liters. That is 24.6 US gallons, okay? According to the French government, the Renault R5 Turbo 2, at a steady 56 miles an hour, delivers 37 miles per gallon. That means it can do 910 miles on one tank of gas. That is from Paris to Budapest, or from New York to Alabama-tucky. Think about this. 16 and a half hours in a car the size of a shoe with an engine in the cabin with you. This is why the French have a patent on being miserable.
The Turbo needed that big tank to go racing, and racing it did. It did well in rally and was outrageously fast over the tarmac stages, winning the Monte Carlo Rally and several others. The only big problem was its timing. The Turbo had the unfortunate luck of debuting at the same time as the Audi Quattro. That all-wheel drive car changed the game for everyone forever. And it meant that rear-drive hatchbacks, no matter how cool, were just never going to win rallies.
On the racetrack, it was just another casualty of Quattro. But on the road, the R5 Turbo gave supercar performance with none of the pretense. And think of the gall it took to make this thing. As an enthusiast, I love that Volkswagen makes a Golf, and then they make a GTI, and then they make a Golf R, which is the ultimate GTI. But one just builds on the next. Renault didn't do that. They went full send and turned a Le Car into a supercar. A Le Supercar that, by the way, drives better than most supercars. And had you known this at the beginning of the episode, that Gandini box-flared poster car you were thinking of would have been this stoned-toed looking legend.
Now we have the lag.
Okay, so you're going to keep the Ferrari framed out the entire time, right?
Yep. Action.
I'm not some rich YouTuber who's going to ask you to like and subscribe. No, I'm a professional journalist. Up, keep the Ferrari out. I'm a professional journalist who's going to ask you to like and subscribe. And that's because that's how YouTube works. If you don't click those buttons, YouTube doesn't know you like what you're seeing and isn't going to show you more of it. If you don't like what you're seeing, well, join the club. And by that, I mean the Hagerty Drivers Club, which gets you access to the award-winning magazine, plus events and discounts on some really great stuff. And after all of this, if you still don't like any of it, well, then just leave a nasty comment below. I have a thick skin. I wouldn't be a professional automotive journalist if I didn't have a thick skin. So come on, say whatever you want. Just make me laugh. Please. Please, I need help. Something has to make me laugh in this world. Come on.